Hello and welcome to this 4IT Tech Elite session, the second of two delivered by Boohoo. Last week we looked at back-end tech, and tonight we will discuss front-end tech for e-commerce retail. Our speakers this evening are Laura McKellar, Technology Director, with her colleagues Cy Fisher, Mobile App Team Lead, and Bobby Howe, Front-End Lead. Laura has spent 7 years at Boohoo, taking responsibility for the e-commerce platforms, all front-end tech and supporting systems, quite a portfolio. Cy manages the full mobile app developer team, Android and iOS, creating some of the highest rated and best performing apps on the App Store. Bobby has 5 years at Boohoo under his belt, joining as a front-end developer and progressing to front-end lead currently. The presentations will last for around 40 to 45 minutes, and then the panel will take questions. So please put anything you want to ask as we go through the session into the chat box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll deal with as many questions as we have time for before we close the session at 7 o'clock. So I'll hand over the screen now and welcome our speakers, Laura, Cy, and Bobby.
Thanks, John. I'll just share my screen quickly. I think you can see that. So again, thanks. Hi, I'm Laura. I'm Tech Director for Digital and Online Marketing. So predominantly, I look after our e-commerce systems and the tech teams that support them. So I've been with the Boohoo Group for 8 years now. As you can see, it's come a long way since I started when we had one brand, but we've always been extremely ambitious. And you can see so far that's shown no means of slowing down. Currently, we've got 2 website e-commerce platforms that we support. We've got Salesforce, Commerce Cloud, and Commerce Tools. We chose to launch Commerce Tools in April this year for our Debenhams marketplace, and all the other brands that you can see on the next slide are on Salesforce. So you can just get a kind of idea of how many sites, internationalization, etc. that we support. So I won't go on, as I'll hand you over to the techies, who are the focus point for this session. So I'll hand you over to Cy, who heads up our mobile app team.
Ooh. Yeah, perfect. Hi guys, I'm Cy Fisher, as on screen. I am mobile app team lead. I've been at Boohoo for 3 years now. I won't go more into detail about that later, but yeah, me there was a few agencies who had my job, but we'll go more into that later. So first of all, just to explain, I run the Android and iOS team, as you can see here on this little lovely bench, living in harmony together. I started out at Boohoo a few years ago as just a senior iOS developer, helped build a brand new Boohoo app from the ground up. Since then, we have come a long way with the Boohoo app over the last 3 years. A few screenshots of the app here. Obviously, as you can see here, that's the Shopple app that you'll be able to see in the nearest app store near you. This is just screenshots from the iOS app, but obviously it's available on Android as well. We started out with the native iOS app, as we said, but since then, that was just on Boohoo. Quite swiftly afterwards, we quickly went to launching the Boohoo Man app, then followed by the Nasty Gal app. Then we acquired a few more brands along the way, as Laura mentioned, along with Miss Pap, Karen Millen, Coast, Oasis, Warehouse, Dorothy Perkins, Burton, and Wallace. Just to explain a bit more about how this works, we actually have the same app and code structure for all of these apps. The difference being we actually, if anyone in the iOS and Android industry, we actually have schemes or flavors in Android built up to basically change the style and colors and branding per brand, but they actually essentially all run on the same code bases, just with different security information and stuff like that, just to get people through, and allows us to share our different brands to all the assets of users on our high quality apps. These apps are all built off running using the SFCC backend system, which is the only one system which Laura briefly mentioned and Bobby will be talking more about later. yeah, so there's obviously a few restrictions to that, but you know, we've got pretty well for the last few years where we're up to now. But yeah, moving on. As we said, as Laura mentioned, we have the Debenhams website out a few months ago on the Commerce Tools platform. Currently, we are in progress with that as we speak. So this is just a coming soon of our app that's in progress. We've been working on that for the last 2 to 3 months now, and aiming to have that released before peak in November. So we'll have that out in the next month or two before end of November at the very least. Otherwise, I'll be fired. No, but seriously, obviously, unlike the other brands and stuff, that's all built on the same framework. This is a completely new app again, built from the ground up rather than the other white label apps. The goal potentially is in future, if this works well, is to bring over some of the brands to using this system as well. The advantage of this is we've been able to build from the ground up. We actually are using a higher minimum operating system of iOS 13, which allows us to use things like Swift UI and a lot of newer things that are given to us by Apple, which we're a bit restricted on with the current Boohoo apps. We're restricted because obviously we have millions and millions of users using them every day. So obviously if we exclude anyone on iOS 12, for example, or iOS 11, it may be a small amount of users, but a small percentage of users can still be thousands and thousands, maybe tens of thousands of users, which is obviously a lot of people, which we don't want to do. Whereas with Debenhams, obviously we're building from the ground up, so we don't have that restriction at the minute. So we are starting with a higher up OS. As well as that, we are using, rather than a REST API, Commerce Tools, we are actually set up a backend with GraphQL, which is kind of groundbreaking and really fun to use. Again, I'll explain a bit more about that later. So our iOS apps are built entirely in Swift, completely native. We purposely wanted them to be native. We made that conscious decision a few years ago for many reasons, but I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I'll go through these a bit, but the proof is in the pudding. Since before me, as I said before, Boohoo used a few agencies to develop their apps. The first app, I'm told, was pretty terrible, buggy. It used web views here and there, and it had problems and people couldn't check out, and there was errors all the time. So they changed to another agency, and then that was so bad that they missed the first agency. So that's when they've turned to bringing in-house native developers like myself, who built brand new internal native app from the ground up. Since then, within the first year, our conversion rate went up 150%, and since then we've bought however many other brands and released apps for all those brands, and that's gone shooting up ever since. So absolutely performing phenomenally. We have over 99.9% crash-free rate for users. The apps are performing absolutely fantastically in all the app stores, as John mentioned, and they work amazingly. And as I say, one of the reasons we can expect this is anyone who works with native development will know it creates a great user experience. It's that instant native feel. You don't have any lag time, you don't have any loading time for web views, all that kind of thing. We use currently UI kit with this rather than Swift UI, obviously, as we mentioned before, just because, again, it was out a few years ago, so we've kept with UI kit for now. And anyone, again, who has worked with iOS will know about storyboards. We're purposely kept away from storyboards for the time being due to conflicts and issues that could happen when collaborating with team members. Try to deal with storyboard files and XML conflicts and stuff is an absolute nightmare when you have a storyboard with loads of different views on, which everyone working and jumping, piggybacking over each other. It just causes an absolute nightmare. So until we get to Swift UI, we're going to be using with nibs for the near future, but we are starting to look into Swift UI as well, so not too far away. For those who aren't aware, the tool that allows us to use Swift and iOS development is a lovely little tool by Apple, which is a free tool called Xcode. It is the go-to and only real native development tool. It's an entire suite for everything you need. It allows you to create files, and it edits your code and runs build time, runtime errors and build time errors, and has an entire debugging suite. As you can see on this screenshot, this is actually using Swift UI again, which actually allows you to render the visual UI alongside the time you're coding at the exact same time, rather than having to build every time, which is another really useful tool. Just an example of how it's really helpful. Along with that, obviously, Xcode also allows us to use things like we can build directly to our phones or the iPhones and stuff to test out features. We can build to simulators for different iPhones, for different models, for different OSs. We can build for different screen sizes, iPads, iPod touches, everything. So it's a really helpful tool for us. And yeah, really allows us to do our job and really well. And it's constantly supported by Apple, and you know, there's constant help for it on forums if we have any issues, and you know, it's really good for us. I'm not a native Android developer, but as I said, my team are. So just to give a bit background like that, Android apps are initially based in Java for Boohoo, the Boohoo apps. However, most of those apps have now been brought up to line to use Kotlin. And anyone who knows anything about Kotlin knows it's, again, very similar to Swift. And there's literally websites where you can compare Swift and Kotlin stuff. They're getting very near nowadays and comparable, and they're just such easy languages to use. And it just makes it fantastic for developers to, you know, crack on with what you're doing, and makes the hard stuff simple, and it just allows you to crack on with your day. As well as that, another really useful tool for the Android guys is if anyone's seen Jetpack Compose, this is their Google image. So unlike this guy with his Coke Jetpack, this is not Jetpack Compose. Jetpack Compose, as I say here, is okay. Cool. Apologies, we have technical issues. PowerPoint's just crashed on us. I blame all Bobby's videos. Cool. I think we're back. John, can you confirm you can see our presentation again?
Yep, it's back.
It was the jetpack GIF,
The jetpack GIF
that caused
the jetpack GIF. Apologies for that, but anyway, yeah, so back to Jetpack Compose. Here's an example of what it is. So for any UI developers out there, front end or web or anything, you can see how simple it is. With literally, this is an example of Google, but you know, with literally a couple of lines of code, you could be laying out an entire view with a nice simple thing using native elements. Really nice and simple, just a few lines of code, and you've got a nice little layout that will be respective of screen layout, screen size and stuff, and use native elements and nice and modern, which is amazing. And I can safely say, since a lot of my team have been using it with the Debenhams app with Jetpack Compose, literally the massive nerds keep going on about how excited they are about using it. I mentioned earlier, I've mentioned more about GraphQL. GraphQL, again, is the backend framework we are using with commerce tools rather than a REST API. And anyone who has not heard of this, it was actually created by Facebook a few years ago internally, and it was since released to the public a few years back, and now is used all around the world already. The difference between this and using a REST API, as it says on the screen, is as a developer, you ask for what you need rather than, you know, getting given what you're given. So with a REST API, obviously, as you may know, when you say, oh, give me this information, they'll just go, right, there is the information you requested. And for any changes in the future, you have to go, right, we need a new API, or we need new properties, and we need to do a release. Whereas with Graph, it can just be updated, and as per this little GIF here, you can just choose exactly what you want and how you want it. It's a really cool framework. It allows for a lot of flexibility, both for us and for the backend development. It means the backend developers have to do a lot less work. Those backend developers being people like people you met last week, like Steve Lawson and stuff, who won't be working directly with this, but those kind of people. So back onto learning about things. One of the things, again, anyone who joined last week will have seen this slide, definitely stolen from Steve Lawson. You know, back to school, I needed to raise this because it's a very good point. You are always learning in the development community, no matter what your role. As a senior developer like me with, you know, 10 years of experience, I'll still be learning stuff every day. whether it's because there's always new releases of information or new languages or new availability functionality coming out by Apple, or it could be some junior developers come in and found some cool new way to do something, or again, junior developers come in and they'll be asking for help, so they'll be asking for stuff. There's always things to learn, so there's always stuff to pick up on. As I said before, Swift UI, for example, it's a new thing for us. We're planning to use Swift UI with the Debenhams app. You know, it's all a brand new game. It's only been out for a couple of years. I'll touch back on that again in the future, but that's a whole new thing for us. Modularization, for example, again, a whole new world, but it can open up a load of new avenues, which I'll go a bit more at as well. You know, there's absolutely loads of things that people are learning all the time. You know, people more experienced than you, people learn other things, and not even just more experience. You might go to a new role in a new company and they'll, you know, give you loads more information and do things in a completely different way, which you might have thought, oh, this is the only way because I've worked in this place for however many years, or I've learned everything this way. This is the only way. But then you go to another place and it's all completely different, and you could learn things, go from MVVM and why MVC is better than MVM, or, you know, that back and forth. But no matter what, no matter who says it, and people might think it, but no one knows everything, unfortunately, no matter what the language, even if Bobby thinks he does. So as I mentioned before, Swift UI, here's a lovely example of it. This is, again, a great example, similar to Jetpack Compose. Again, if you just look at the left for any developers, there's less than 83 lines of code. It literally just says, you know, within the body, here is an image, here's some text, and it goes in this order with this stack. And then if you look on the right, it's like an entire page of information, an entire article laid out for the user. This is done in real time as well, so you don't have to build the app just to view this. It's all really nicely done. So this is one of the things, like I said, in learning. We'd love to be able to do this straight away. Due to limitations, we haven't been able to do it with Boohoo yet, as I said before, because of the minimum OS. But with Debenhams, we're planning to bring this in ASAP as soon as we've got released. The reason we haven't done it straight away is just because of our short deadlines. As we said, we've got a very short deadline. We tend to do that a lot around here at Boohoo. You know, we aim to get our Debenhams app out in less than 3 or 4 months. We're on schedule to do so, but to be able to do that, we had to work within the confines of what we already know, unfortunately, and not just be learning all the time. But you know, this is something we're going to be hitting on very hard, very fast, as soon as we release it the next month or so. Again, another really cool thing, just to come back on this picture from the start, Apple and Android and love, but this is to do with modularization. Another thing for us to look at, again, we haven't been able to do this yet for time reasons, but we are planning to look at modularizing our apps to use any technical based stuff shared across both platforms. So currently both apps independently handle all logic to do with UI, front end and back end integration, and, you know, cart handling, product handling, all that kind of stuff directly with the APIs and REST APIs, graph APIs. But what we aim to do, we aim to, you know, match that logic across them both. We're planning to, you know, have the UI in each individual platform on their own, but then the back-end logic. So when we speak and communicate with the graph layer and how we handle that, and, you know, there's a lot of logic around how we handle baskets and how we handle updating the baskets and how we handle the user's product information and the swatch information, how that goes back and forth. All that logic, it's just duplicated on Android and iOS. So we really want to modularize that. So the best way we found to do that is we're actually going to be both writing all in Kotlin in one modular form. The reason for that is because Kotlin will build natively in Xcode, whereas vice versa, Swift won't build natively in Android. So it's a bit of learning for us iOS guys that we've got to learn a bit of Kotlin. But as I said earlier, Kotlin and Swift are so similar. It should be hopefully a pretty easy task for us. So that would be a really nice one for us. It'll help us going forward. It means, you know, it would be a lot of time to build in the first place, but it'll save us half the time. Every single time in the future you have to update anything new, you just have one developer to fix some kind of, you know, basket integration issue that affects both platforms rather than each individually. So this is a really good tool we're looking into, and yeah, we're pretty excited about it too. Cool. For those who aren't aware, you probably should be. If you're not, then go Googling. Git is obviously one of the most important things with all development. You know, it's, if anyone doesn't know, research, but it's just a management tool that allows teams to work together. So instead of me doing some work and Bobby doing some work and Laura doing some work and then having to pass it to each other to add on their work or something that would be manual or something, or some file, then, you know, it allows us all to work together. It allows management to merge in those features together. It shows conflicts, it shows issues, it shows where the merge is a problem. It just allows everyone to work together really seamlessly and well. But along those lines, it's really important for any team quite early on to kind of figure out a really good branching structure for Git. This is one of the very first learnings we had a couple of years ago. As soon as you start getting a few developers, you really need to think about how your branch structure works. So, for example, we have a main and a develop branch, but instead of using the develop branch, because we constantly flow within sprints, we actually use sprint branches as our constant go-to branches and have a new sprint branch every time. This allows us to create feature branches off that sprint and merge back into that sprint. But it also allows anyone who's working on a future sprint to do their work and merge into that sprint separately. So it allows everyone to work asynchronously along the board, asynchronously, whichever way. It allows everyone to work together at the same time on different sprints and not starting overlapping on develop and then being like, oh, we have too much code in develop that shouldn't be released yet and stuff. So it works really well for us. But yeah, it's really important that you get that nailed. There's a lot of examples online, but realistically, the best case is what works for your team. I wouldn't say, I think I've had cases where people in the past have gone, why don't you do this exact structure that they do online on this website that says this is the best way to do it? And that's because it doesn't match how we work. So you just need to know how your team's going to work and you need to figure out your way. Speaking about doing it your way and on the back of Git, code reviews and pull requests. So as we said, when you're working in this kind of environment, anything you're working on, every single thing you work on needs to be merged in, need to work with other team members. Everything you work needs to be passed on to someone else. It needs to be compared. There's other people with different opinions. Anyone who doesn't know how code review works, it's pretty simple. If I'm working on a feature, I'll do a pull request or a code review to Bitbucket. That'll then be on show to the rest of the development team, and they will see that, and they will see all the changes, what's changing, why it's happening, and they can comment and say, why have you done this way? Why have you bothered to change that? You don't need to do that. They can give opinions. They can go, you know what, I really like this. It doesn't really happen that way much, but they could do if they want it to be nice. So there's a lot of that kind of thing. But more importantly, the most important part of that is, as a manager, I've always said to the team, for us, a bit further step than a lot of other teams do. So a lot of other teams will just have a code review, look through the lines of code and go, yeah, that's cool, approved, crack on, go with your day. What we do within our team is we have a bit more pride in it, and we will make sure every team member, actually before they approve it, they actually pull the code themselves, pull the branch. It takes a bit more time, but they'll run the code themselves and have a play with it and see if it matches the features. This has caught a lot of mistakes in the past, things that you don't see, because sometimes you might be a bit narrow-minded and go, I've solved this problem, but someone else might come in and go, oh, it's broken this over here. So it just saves a lot of time going back and forth with UAT, or even risking stuff going into live with any issues. And along with this, it's like I said, it's just that massive key of ownership. That's one of the things I've bestowed on the team really heavily, is ownership of tickets. We just have a massive thing on excellence, and we want, we don't, in the best cases, we don't want tickets to come back from the UAT team as much as possible. I mean, don't get me wrong, they will. That's what the test team's there for. That's why they're really good at their jobs. They will find the stuff we don't find, but we just don't want as little as possible coming back from them. We want our stuff to be epic, and we want to be, the best. And that's, again, another reason why our apps are so good and have such a good crash rating and do so well in the public and perform so well. And yeah, that's one of the last things about that. And my final point, again, I know I've mentioned about you're always, everything's a school day, but just, again, it's a bit more about learning yourself and really taking a positive way of thinking about things. One of the things I've tried to explain to a lot of people is, you always need to be learning yourself. Like, don't be stressed about anything if you don't know something. If someone comes to you and says, oh, I think we need to do MVVM rather than MVC, or vice versa, or someone's explained something about ARC to do iOS, or someone mentions something about Jetpack, and you're like, what is this thing? And you have no idea what it is. don't panic, just be honest. If not everyone knows everything, as I mentioned earlier, go away, do your research, teach yourself some stuff, go learn what it is, and don't be stressed about it. Not everyone knows everything, just teach yourself something, and yeah, you'll massively improve as a developer going forward. And then yeah, years down the line, you'll probably help someone else with that exact situation. So yeah, it's a big point. And yeah, there's not much more to go through. But yeah, that's me. That's me, app team lead. Obviously, if there's any questions, then let me know. I apologize if I haven't been through everything, but there's only a certain amount of stuff we can go through on this. But yeah, thank you for listening. And yeah, I will pass over to Bobby.
Cheers, side. It's really weird. I can't tell if I'm in a camera shot here, but we'll guess and say that I am.
Perfect.
I actually wasn't on the leaflet, so I could talk about anything, I feel like, this evening, but I will resist from doing my amateur stand-up comedy routine. So I'm Bobby, and I'm the front-end team lead here at Boohoo. I'm just going to give everyone hopefully a bit of useful insight into our e-commerce platform that we use for the majority of our websites, which is Salesforce Commerce Cloud. So I think we'll just get right into it. So Laura touched on it a tiny bit. Salesforce Commerce Cloud, which I'm going to say a lot throughout this talk, it's a cloud-based software as a service e-commerce platform, which was originally known as Demandware. But back in 2016, it was acquired by Salesforce, and they've rebranded it, which is now called Salesforce Commerce Cloud. Not a lot of people have heard of it. I certainly had not heard of it when I started here at Boohoo. I pulled some interesting stats actually from Salesforce. So apparently back in 2017, $21 billion of transactions were made throughout SFCC systems. So, you know, it's quite battle hardened, and they like to guarantee 99.9% uptime, which I was laughing to myself. That's very similar to the crash, the app uptime. So maybe just everyone's claiming that they're 99.9% of the time going to be up. So yeah, currently running on the SFCC platform, we have, I think it's 11 brands. Yeah. So I won't read them all out to you. You can see we did just start off originally with the Boohoo US site. At the time, we were running 3 separate e-commerce platforms, and one of our big tests is peak trading. So in the past, peak trading, we'd get that much traffic, we'd almost be bracing ourselves for the sites to just go down. Luckily, with SFCC, first year, we had 100% uptime, and the sites were transactional throughout peak Black Friday, which is our busiest day. So since then, we've rolled it out on all of our Boohoo regions, and every new brand that we've acquired has gone straight onto the SFCC platform. Like Simon mentioned as well, which they're not, sometimes the app team aren't its biggest fan, but they also use our API layer for the app, which is quite restrictive, but yeah. We're getting all our sales through one channel, which is good and bad, I guess, in its own different ways. So for anyone that's never seen it before, prepare to get your mind blown. This is what Salesforce Commerce Cloud looks like. This is basically your starting point if you was to create a website in SFCC. It's very nice, attractive, green coloured e-commerce site. But we're not really bothered about how it looks out the box. Out the box, it's given us a core set of e-commerce functionality. So we've got our products, category system, stock pricing, shipping, payment methods, and it's also powered by very extensive campaign and promotions functionality, and also comes with its own content management system. So there's a lot there. It's down to the brand, how they will use it. Basically, there's a lot of functionality which can be plugged into and utilized. What I'm going to give you a bit more of an insight into is the technical side, I guess, from a front end perspective. So I'm going to introduce everyone to the wonderful world of SFCC cartridges. So yeah, this I like to say it's like the most important part of SFCC because it's all the code which is basically powering the site. I like to think of them, they're just modules. I don't know why they named them as cartridges. It's a very funny name for a bit of web technology. So they're just the building blocks of the website, rather than having one huge code base and files pulling from one folder. Everything's split out into its own cartridge, and within each cartridge we split that out into templates, static content. We have form definitions and JavaScript controllers. So yeah, it basically just is a cleaner way of splitting out, you know, business process, functionality throughout the site. And if you, I'll go on to, so one of the main things is we have our core Salesforce cartridges, and then from a third-party perspective, there's something called the link marketplace, which is where a lot of third parties and companies have developed their own cartridges, which you can just plug into SFCC. So they like to champion that you can just download them and plug them in, which sometimes it works really well. Other times, if we want to customize things and we don't want things to look like the hideous green demo that I showed on a previous slide, that's when developers have to get involved and yeah, customize things. So just breaking down the anatomy of the cartridges, the first and probably the most important part is the templating side of things. So SFCC created their own templating language rather than using something that was already available, and this is called ISML, which I like to think of, it's just HTML with some extra functionality that helps us plug into data from Salesforce Commerce Cloud. So it gives us some nicer features like if statements. We're able to loop through data and also do things like remote include other templates or different bits of functionality, which helps with the modular approach, which I mentioned earlier. One of the main features with ISML that we utilize a lot is the content management side of things. So with minimal amount of code, we can enable our trade and our content teams to be able to update and manage the site without having to ever touch any HTML or any of the templates. So I'm just going to give you a little insight into how many, these 7 lines of code. I need to mute my videos because I recorded them myself awkwardly. They give our content team a really nice interface that they can use. So this way they can manage and schedule different content, different promotion and campaigns, which looks like this in the back end as SFCC. And then what the end user gets to see is our beautiful homepage. So literally in 6 lines of ISML, we're able to serve up content like this from the back end. Again, we can do this without having to worry about doing code releases. It's really dynamic, and we're quite a fast-paced, heavy trading company. So our content and trade teams need to get new promotions, new discounts on site as fast as possible, just using this kind of set up, they really can like flourish, and maybe they change things a lot more than I would like them to do, but to each own. Won't play it again. So other than the template inside of things, another big part of the front end is static content, which is made up of 3 parts. So we've got images. You could serve up your images natively from SFCC, where we take a different approach. So we'll serve from a CDN, which just helps with performance side of things. It just depends on how big your site is and how much traffic you've got. It just helps our servers a lot more that all our images are getting hosted from a third party, especially the amount of traffic we've got. Another area of the static content is styling. So this is not really specific to SFCC. You can pretty much do this however you'd want. You could just serve up and write in plain vanilla CSS, but the stack that we're using is SAS, and it just gives us a lot of extra tooling and does a lot of heavy lifting. We don't have to worry about a lot of things. So we have our build tools running through Webpack using auto prefixer. So stuff like browser compatibility and backwards compatibility, we can focus on using the latest, CSS properties available, like Flexbox. We're moving on to using CSS Grid now, but in terms of the cross-browser and backwards compatibility, that's all automated, so we can just focus on the nice, shiny new stuff and not worry about having to dump in loads of browser prefixes and loads of old dirty Internet Explorer hacks. So that's a static. One more thing that's static is client-side JavaScript. Another, it's an important one in terms of users interacting with pages, content, just things loading on demand rather than refreshing the page. So the way that we serve our JavaScript is similar to SAS. We're trying to do this in a modular way, and everything's broken down into components, where we've started with some core functions and functionality. We'll then extend and add to or edit where we need or where we see fit. And again, using Webpack, we'll just split these files out. I kind of didn't mention it with the styling side of things, but the way that we use Webpack to bundle out and componentize elements, we're just making sure we're only loading files where it's needed. Especially the amount of traffic, again, we've got a homepage, we want to be super snappy, and there's not a lot of JavaScript and styling needed, so minimal files are used. Like in checkout, we'll only get checkout based JavaScript and styling, and all the rest of it. Get the gist. So that's it for the static content side of things. Another important part in Salesforce is forms. So with any e-commerce site, you're going to need forms at some point to buy products. The way this is handled in SFCC, we have to define all our forms and properties in XML. So it's kind of good in this way. I didn't put all the regions on my slides, but Laura put a screen of all the different countries that we support. In my example here, we can serve different locales, different forms, or different validation. Definitely helps in terms of, say, phone number formatting isn't the same across every country. Addresses are different, postcodes. So the way that SFCC handles form definitions, we're able to utilize the inbuilt localization, which is fun times. Just crossing into the localization as well is the translation side of things. So there's a lot of text in the code base not everything's CMS managed in CMS. And to do this in SFCC, it's using properties files. So your starting version it's translated, I don't know how many countries, but it comes with a core set of translated files. One of the main things is that if you add any custom or extend any functionality, you have to maintain the translations. It's like in this example we've got a product called Boohoo Premier, which we kind of have a lot of properties added into the code base. If you then want to launch that on a different locale, it's a case of getting translations for every string. The organization is quite well because it enables us to just pull all the strings that we need translated, and then we've worked with third parties where we've just sent them the file. They can send us back a nice version of the page in this example in French, and we just chuck it into the code base and all the translations are done automatically, which is great. And at least we know we're all singing from the same hymn sheet in terms of where content strings are being pulled from. The last section, my cartridge breakdown, is probably about as important as the templating, and that is the JavaScript controllers. So any routing on the front end, it needs to be defined somewhere in the back end, and this is done in the controls section of our cartridges. It's all done via Node.js, and it's JavaScript based, which is really nice to work with, really easy to read and understand, and it gives us a place where we can split up any business logic or any functionality that we need to do. We can just handle this in the JavaScript controllers, and then when we send the data to the templates, we can just output stuff and just avoid, basically keep your templates as clean as possible, do all your heavy lifting in JavaScript. So yeah, that's pretty much the main sections, and one of the things that's worked really well for us in SFCC is the way that the cartridges fall back. So I found this quite nice diagram which highlights how it works. Obviously, the starting point, we have our core or base functionality, and then it's simply a case of you either layer on top any new plugins, or if you want to extend a certain file, the files fall back. The way we have it set up, all of our brands are sharing the code base, but then we have quite a lot of custom coding done per brand, which then we've just split out. Each brand has its own cartridge, its own module, so we can split out if we know Boohoo wants a certain bit of functionality. If it works really well, we roll it out to all the other brands, or if another brand wants to do something different, we can rely on the fallbacks. It works with all the files, which is really well, not just templating. So CSS, JavaScript, controllers, everything can be overwritten by adding a custom cartridge on top. So yeah, just to give you a little insight, and I've said that all those 11 brands are sharing the same code base, but then they'll look a lot different, and our customers are quite varied. So, all the sites just can't work the same and look the same. We've got customers, different age bases, so just some nice examples of how the brands are doing things differently in templates. It enables us as well to kind of test new features out on certain brands, and because we're encapsulating everything in its own cartridges, if it works really well, we can roll it out to different brands. Like you'll see our category pages, Boohoo normally launches a nice feature, and then it'll trickle out into the other brands. Another thing, it lets you test out stuff that might not always work so well. because we've got so many different brands, rather than just adding to one code base and every brand gets the same changes, we can split out rather nicely. And there's our lovely checkout. Yeah, sorry about the background noise. Someone awkwardly changing the bin behind me. But that's about it from me, I guess. If anyone is, one of the things and a lot of developers struggle is to find resources on Salesforce Commerce Cloud because it is a paid platform, but there is heaps of information out there if you know where to look. If this is, the kind of thing that you're into or you want to know more about it, there's quite a lot of community-based knowledge out there. But I think that wraps me up. I don't know if I'm going to. Can I stop the slideshow? I think we're just going to. Yeah, I think we can go back to you there, John. That's me done.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks for that very much. If I take back the screen for a moment, and
I think you jinxed it about the cleaner because we've got our very own cleaner in the background. But
it happens in the best of webinars. Now we've got some great questions. There we are. We've got a number of them from the audience. Just to confirm, are the cartridges written in JavaScript?
Yeah, so the backend controllers are in JavaScript, and the client side that's in vanilla JS as well. Yeah.
Now, is it right to say that the website consists essentially of templates, and that you can customize the content fairly easily? Is that right?
Yeah, so it's a mix. Obviously, you can customize it as much as you want. So from my slides, if you saw the green startup site looks very different to Boohoo and the rest of our brand sites. So it's as customizable as you want it to be, and even the CMS side of things, you can choose. Everything could be hard coded if you wanted it to be, but we utilize the CMS a lot, so we can, like I mentioned, make changes without having to worry about code releases and doing development deployments. So yeah, hope that answers that.
There's a good question here about you've given a great deal of information about all the different brands and the fast pace and the scale of the operation, the sheer scale. And we've been asked how big are the actual teams who are dealing with all of this?
So, I mean, I'll start from my team, we actually, so for BAU standard stuff, we actually have a team of 4 or 5 native developers on each team. So we have 5 Android developers and 4 iOS developers currently, including myself. But to help us with Debenhams, we have also onboarded another 4 or 5 offshore agencies, developers to help us out from Indava. They're offshore to help us with the workload, because obviously it's a hell of a lot of work, especially trying to get something like Debenhams across the line in 3 or 4 months.
And we don't generally have brand specific teams, so it's just one pool of resource across the pot until Debenhams, because it's on a different code base using commerce tools. We've had to just differentiate for this one, but we need to expand the teams now. Now we're up to 12 brands, so yeah, that'll be evolving throughout the next few months.
Here's a perceptive question about the different countries that you operate in. You spoke about the automatic translation, which I guess these days one would expect anyway, but how is that layout and presentation and the actual translation checked against the different languages once the automatic part has taken place?
I think I can take this, or do you want to take it? So
it's different for us as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of the layout's the same, isn't it? One challenge was we launched our MENA sites, so and in Israel as well, weren't it? So that's obviously content displayed left to right rather than right to left.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of it's just manual testing. There's no other way around it. You know, we've got automated testing on the websites, but unfortunately, it's human eyes that can need to catch if content's reading right and stuff. It looks the way it is. You know, we can't just add. Even the automatic translations need to get proofed because they don't sometimes make as much sense. I don't know. You know, it's not like we can put everything in Google Translate. It's got to make sense to the markets that we're targeting.
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the market as well, because if it's a big market, we can invest in getting a localized person in the e-com team that can check the updates, and not every update, but you could do a general good check of what's coming back. And then some of the other markets, we've got some market presence in those regions that can check it. We work with different affiliate partners that can make sure what we're getting is good quality.
And from the mobile side, it's even more of a pain because obviously, unlike the website, I know they have to handle for smaller screens, but for the mobile app, we have to handle for obviously such a small screen size all the time, especially some of the smaller screens like iPhone SE and stuff. Even like you say, the languages such as like German and stuff, some of the translated direct words will be like way longer than a standard button that we expect. So we, like I say, we've had to go back and forth with actually some people in the company who natively speak language to adjust some languages, or like I say, our UAT team will pick up a lot of it. But like I say, a lot of it will just come from people using it in the environment throughout the rest of the teams, through the commerce teams, through the trade teams and stuff. Sorry. They'll view a lot of it and be like, you know, that's not going to fit or that doesn't make sense, that kind of stuff. So yeah, a bit of a team effort really on that one.
Thank you. Si, another one for you. What dev tools do you use for your mobile apps? Flutter, Xamarin, I think that is?
So we don't use Xamarin or Flutter because they aren't 100% native. We, like you said, cross-platform, and they do use native elements, but they don't use them 100% correctly. So they, one, have build problems, and two, don't have the exact natural feel. This is why I think you saw in the presentation, we actually use Xcode for iOS as standard, and Android, we use Android Studio. We actually use them just so we can do full native development. We actually spoke to one of our other companies, PLT, recently, and they currently use, for example, React, and from speaking to us, they're actually aiming towards hopefully getting more and more native like we are, for a lot of reasons, including the UX, and the actual user experience is a much better experience when you actually get it. Plus, when you actually work with the UX teams that we work with, a lot of the custom elements that get built are a lot better to work with when you're using proper native language and native tools rather than some kind of Xamarin or something cross-platform.
Thank you. Do you use CI/CD for building your apps? What about static code analysis tools to supplement your code reviews?
Yeah, so we've actually got some code analysis tools anyway. We have a few bits in place. We have Swift linted stuff on iOS. We have a linting tool on Kotlin. We've actually just started implementing, like to be fair, in a minute, we have most of our UA team handles most of the testing currently, but we're in progress with, we have some our side, developer-driven testing and stuff our side is a very small amount, just because of the speed we work at. So we rather focus on the features rather than the testing side of things that we have with the UAT team. But we also have someone at the minute working with setting up some CI tests and stuff, so that we already have an automation process in place where we do automated builds nearly every single evening when we do features. So we're planning to piggyback off the back of that to run our automation scripts using things like I can't remember off the top of my head now, but yeah, Cypress stuff. That's for stuff to do with the front end stuff, isn't it?
Bonus points for Laura.
Bonus points for Laura. But yeah, so we have some teams in place to create a big suite of scripts and stuff at the minute to kind of cover all scenarios for CI for our existing Boohoo apps and future Debenhams apps as well.
Thank you for that. How do you troubleshoot errors in your apps when they are out in production?
So in our production, it depends on the case. We actually use Firebase is our go-to for reporting. So first of all, out of the box, that handles crash reporting and obviously logs any information by default anyway. But one of the most useful things we found a few years ago was actually creating our own login system, which not a lot of people do, but there's actually a logging function where you can log just every generic event in Firebase as well, just as they go along, which doesn't actually log anywhere in an analytics event until there's a crash. And then when there's a crash, you've got a big list of what the user did to lead up to the issue. So that gives us a nice little hint of where a user might have been when they had an issue. In regards to if someone finds a live issue, like I say, it depends on the case. We might have to build a local version of the live app. We might run it through. We might probably get down to using the debugging tools again in Xcode, for example. Just going line by line, like looking about where it is, trying to find where we can reduce it. And then if we know, we can normally get, especially the people who've been here as long as me or some of the other senior people have since day one, as soon as we know where the error is or an issue is, we can probably kind of pinpoint where in the code it is anyway, kind of narrow it down. And then we can go, right, let's start putting we put some breakpoints in and go line by line and figure out if there's missing information or whatever. We also have, to be honest, one of the things we did a while ago was we basically put guard statements in everywhere throughout the app that basically check if there's any missing information that we expect from the back end or from a trade content asset, something like that. So if anything fails on that kind of point of view and it's a hard stop, that again will alert Firebase and we'll get some hints. And if we start getting like a sudden velocity alert from Firebase saying you've suddenly had 1,000 people hit some error, we'll be like straight on it. We need to go find it straight away and solve the problem and potentially get a hotfix out if there's an issue.
Thank you. And finally, just 30 seconds each. This is obviously a absorbing career. And the question is, for each of you in turn, Laura, we'll start with you. How did you start your career in front-end web dev?
Well, I actually started in project management. So that's how I started in tech in general. And then that's just evolved into front end and e-commerce tech for me.
Yeah, I actually started as an apprentice at Barclays. Not really knowing what I wanted to do, just I knew that I did well in IT at college. And then I said to the person when I started on the first day when I got into this apprenticeship that I was good at one unit as well at college back in the day was a bit of development in Visual Basic. And then they said, oh, we won't do that, but if something pops up, we'll let you know. And then a couple of months on, they said, oh, we'll give you a chance of that. And then again, it gave me a few months to try and teach myself development, app development and stuff. So I just went away and found a load of resources and tried to teach myself. And then 10 years on, I'm here.
And Bobby?
Yeah, so I actually studied computer science at uni. And then after I graduated, I was working as a back-end developer as a junior. And then I just throughout the years drifted more into full stack, and then now I've gone full circle and doing front end development. So yeah, that's about it for me, I think.
Well, thank you for that, and we've come to the end of our time. So thank you very much indeed, Laura, Sai, and Bobby. You've given us a fantastic view of the front end tech at Boohoo and answered some great questions too. We'll share the recording of this session in the next day or two. And in the meantime, when you close your browser session, and again by email in an hour's time, you'll be invited to complete a very short survey to tell us how you found this session and how we can keep improving. Please do take a moment to help with this. We really appreciate the input. I hope you've enjoyed this session. Thank you for being here. Thank you again to Boohoo and of course to our speakers, and goodbye.
Cheers. Bye everyone.